Today on the Roundhouse, we are talking to an artist who is officially commissioned by Lionel. Albert!
In days past, the roundhouse was where the railroad worker united with the steam locomotive, each to prepare for the journey ahead. Today, it's where we examine the history, the industry, the machines, the hobby, and the passion behind railroading. News, interviews, stories, and more. So climb aboard. This is The Roundhouse.
Welcome to The Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozarek, and this is episode number 139 of our Trains and Railroading podcast, where we're talking about everything in the industry and the hobby. You name it, and we discuss it. Today, this episode was actually suggested by my wife, Bethany, because we were assembling a puzzle. It was a painting of a bunch of Lionel Trains sitting on a shelf. And once we completed this 2,000-piece puzzle that was very challenging to complete, we could really admire the artwork. And Bethany said to me, "You should interview the artist." So that's what we're doing. We're talking to her about her paintings and work for Lionel, how they use that material, as well as her tips for getting into painting train scenes and her work beyond railroading. Before we get to that, though, I want to thank all of you for a magnificent 2023 on the podcast. It's been great to have you along for the ride. If you're new, well, welcome aboard. The Roundhouse podcast is a presentation of Streamliner Media. That's my company, where I use digital storytelling, especially video, to help sell your business, tourist, railroad, museum. You can reach out to me at streamlinermedia.com. I want to thank those of you on Patreon who are supporting the Roundhouse, folks like Thomas and NH Jim, who signed up this past month. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to get early access to episodes of the Roundhouse and some other perks, go to patreon.com/theroundhouse. And I want to thank the Mechanical Services Department of the Strasburg Railroad for sponsoring this episode. Learn more at mechanical.strasburgrailroad.com. Our guest today is an artist and the first person licensed by Lionel Trains to depict their toys and the nostalgia they generate throughout the years. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Miss Angela Trotta Thomas.
Hi, Nick. Nice to meet you. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. I am taking a look at a number of your works and really interested to get into your thoughts and process behind them. So, good point to start is, how did you get your beginning in painting?
Well, I always wanted to be an artist as long as I can remember. That's always been my dream. So I think it started when I was very young. But when I, obviously, when I got older, it got to be much more of a serious desire to become an artist. So I went to college, got an illustration degree, and then went back for my master's years later when I had small children. And that's when everything started to change in my career. And that's when I became licensed with Lionel Trains.
What was the point for you where it transitioned from just something that you did as expression to, oh, I could actually do this for a living?
Probably in high school, but I think I always thought that I could do something in the art field to make a living, whether it be a painter. Now, the painting, the fine art painting didn't start until, maybe about 20 years ago, I'd say. But I'm with Lionel for 32 years now. So I was doing the what we used to refer to as illustration, but it just kind of evolved into becoming much more fine art and accepted in the fine art world.
Who has influenced your work? Was it other artists that got you started into this, or was it that you got started and then started to look at others and say, oh, I like what this person does in their body of work?
Sort of both. I've always been encouraged by my family, friends, teachers to pursue this. So I've always gotten positive reinforcement back. And I guess as a kid, that's really what you respond to. But as far as art was concerned, I was always searching and always looking at art. And obviously, Norman Rockwell was a big influence on me. And many people have said that I kind of evoke the same sort of emotion, the nostalgic emotion. But I wasn't really trying to copy his style or anything like that. I was much more interested in how people related to the art. And John Singer Sargent and Maxwell Parrish, they were all artists that I admired and really researched quite a bit, either for their ability to stir up an emotion and also the way that they applied the paint and the colors and the chroma and, just the excitement of the painting. So it was a lot of factors, but I would say probably the support as I was younger was probably the biggest move to becoming an artist.
Now, did you have a Lionel Train set when you were a kid?
We had Lionel Train sets. My dad, my brother, we had them in the family. And my father did put up Lionel Trains every Christmas under the tree. It was just the Christmas layout, ran around the tree. But it was very much a part of our preparation for Christmas when I was growing up. So I just sort of took it for granted that that's what everybody does. And then I was lucky enough to meet my husband and find out that he was a very strong toy train enthusiast and was very into toy trains when he was little. And then, usually lose it in your teens and maybe early 20s. But when we started a family, it all came back and became very much part of our Christmas and has been ever since.
How did your relationship with Lionel begin?
That was that was kind of a fluke. I was working on a master's research project and I had two small children and I was busy with the work of my career, which was a lot of illustration plus the work for the master's program, and I was overwhelmed. And my husband started showing me the old catalogs, and the artwork in the old catalogs was so evocative and so moving that I became really intrigued with it. And I didn't realize that that was the third, during the 50s, that was the third most widely distributed catalog in America. So I had no idea how big it was. But when I started to, what happened is my husband said to me, I'll help you with that if you want to do something with this kind of art. And at that point, I was really in need of help. So that's when I really got into looking at all the catalogs and really realized that because I always painted children and I always painted things that revolve around the children's world on my own, not for illustration purposes, but on my own, it seemed like a kind of a natural place for me to go. So that's sort of how the art started. Then we went down to the Toy Train Association library and worked with the woman that was running the library at the time, and this was 1991, to get more information on the old catalogs. And when they saw the artwork, they really felt that it had some value as far as Christmas cards and that sort of thing. So the president at the time was Nick Ladd, and he was vice president of John Wanamaker's. And we had a meeting down in Philadelphia, and he said that he felt it should not just be Christmas cards, but I should do something with fine art, like fine art prints and that sort of thing, because no one has ever tried to do this before. And when you think about it, there are airplane artists, there are train artists, there are, just about any interest you can find artists that focus in that place, but there really wasn't anybody that was doing anything with Lionel Train art. And really, it's such a big part of the American fabric that it baffled me that no one had ever tried anything like that. So I went ahead and did a few paintings and sent them directly out to Dick Kuhn, who was the owner of Lionel at the time. And a week later, they licensed me to create paintings depicting the memories of Lionel Trains through the century. That's mostly what I'm known for, is that I bring back the old nostalgic feelings that kids from the 50s, 40s, 60s felt when they were wanting these trains and playing with these trains. So that's really where my head was at, and that's what I was interested in painting.
How do you approach illustrating nostalgia? Because that's such a broad concept, and clearly something that a lot of your work, even that outside of the Lionel body of work, revolves around. What is your approach to that?
I think I always think in a story. My paintings are kind of a story. So when I create these things in my head, I want people to relate to them, obviously, but I also want them to kind of see the story or what's going on in the painting. I do a lot of work in many different genres, but I'm mostly interested in, not only is it a fine painting, which is very important to me, but I also want it to be something that people can emotionally relate to.
Of course, I encourage you who are joining us to visit her website, angelatrottathomas.com, so you can see some of her works and see what we're talking about. Let's take a look at, actually, I'm going to be biased, the first piece of work of yours that I had experience with, which was Well-Stocked Shelves. My wife purchased for me as a gift a 2,000-piece puzzle version of that wonderful illustration, which was a bear to put together, as a 2,000-piece puzzle is, but it was so impressive to see the finished product and so large. For something like that, where you don't have any people in the illustration itself, and it is just this illustration of different trains sitting on these shelves and some boxes and a couple of old Lionel catalogs. How do you design something like that to evoke nostalgia?
Oh, well, first of all, not only was it a bear to put your puzzle together, but it was a bear to paint it and put it together. So what the thought process behind that one was not so much the child looking at the train, which I've done plenty of times, but much more what the child's dream of about their trains would be. And I thought that, every child would want to have all those trains. And I'm not talking about collectors of today. Obviously, hopefully they can relate to it as well. But as a kid, where would they be? They'd be on a shelf in his room and have all those engines, especially the ones that I chose, which are, you know, primo engines, and everybody really, sought after them back in the day. Um, I felt like that would evoke a feeling for collectors today, in the way that that's what they would have loved to have seen on their shelves, and probably that's what's on their shelves now. So I was still going for the emotional impact, even though the person or the child or the man was not in the painting. The thought was there, the feeling was there. And that was probably my most challenging painting. Obviously, it was a very big painting. So those engines were probably 8 inches. I'm sorry, 8 inches high each. So, you can look at the whole thing and see how big that was. And that resonated with so many collectors. It ended up being on puzzles, Christmas decor, ornaments. On the sides of the actual Lionel box cars, they have a whole set of the three shelves. Each shelf is the side of a box car. So obviously really rang home to a lot of collectors.
Whenever I look at illustrations of trains that are geometrically accurate, I always think, how do they do that? Especially with streamlined locomotives and streamlined diesels, because you've got all these funky curves. And I always look at that as such a challenge. So
And rivets.
how do you, other than just imagine a ton of practice and experience, learn to develop that geometric spacing when it comes to depicting trains?
Well, I have a very extensive drawing background. I've even taught drawing at a college level for many years. So perspective is a big part of drawing skills, and I've always focused on perspective. So what I do is once I decide what the idea is, because it starts with a concept always, then I'll do some thumbnail sketches and kind of like set it up in my head as to how I would like it to be. And then if I have the trains, I'll photograph the trains that way. I also set them up. I have a big shelf table behind my easel that I can look at where I set everything up, and it's in the proper perspective and all that sort of thing. But the way I do that is I block it in first. I will block in the the shapes in their perspective, just almost like rectangles. I'll get into very little detail at that point. Maybe I'll throw a smokestack on, or a cow catcher in the front or something. But basically, it's really, really simplified. Then once I get because I can kind of tell looking at it as a drawing at that point, if the perspective is reading right and that sort of thing. I'll adjust whatever needs to be adjusted. Then really, to be honest with you, it's a lot easier just to go in there and put the details in. I just look at it now. Like, for example, steam engines, especially if they're coming at you at an angle or front, there's a lot of just dabs of color and paint in the right places that make it read exactly like what it is. So the detail on the sides of them going back could be very simple and very, easily isn't the wrong word, but quickly done, because I've done it so many times now. I try to focus on the main parts, like if it would be the front of the engine, like wall stock shelves was the front of many engines. So that first drawing was just a bunch of rectangles on top of shelves, and then making sure that the rectangles were the right height compared to the next one, and that sort of thing. And then basically I go in and I put all the details in, and I change a lot too as I go, as I paint. Nothing is carved in stone until it's a done deal.
In terms of having reference material when you are creating these illustrations, do you have actual models of the locomotives in the studio, or are you working off of photographs or some other means?
Oh, we have loads of trains and they're all over my studio. They're all over my husband's train room. So yes, I have the reference at my fingertips for the most part. Now, I don't have every single one. And sometimes when people want, private commission and it's not an engine that I have, I will either, tell them how I want it photographed, or a lot of people have just sent me the engine and said, send it back when you're finished. So, that's pretty much the way, it always helps to have the engines at my disposal, because photographs only show so much. They really, they're great for some things, but they only show so much in the detail. The detail that you see that I can get in these engines is usually comes from the actual engine, like having that in front of me.
As far as the people subjects are concerned, right now I'm looking at window wishing, and it's this lovely image of a girl admiring a Lionel GG1. Who are you? Are you choosing specific people as subjects, or how do you come about that process of who these children are?
Well, the very first, that's a remake of an original painting. The original window wishing was actually the very first print that I released, and probably I would say the most iconic of my whole body of work, because of the wishing. Especially for a GG1, very few kids back in the day, their parents could afford the GG1. So, and I learned this because I'm not only married to one of these guys, but I'm around very many of our friends are train collectors. So I kind of listen and pay attention to what they remembered the most. And that was a big memory of going down to the department store and looking in the window and wishing for the train. So what I wanted to do there is I wanted to focus very intensely in just the child's face, and the engine. And there's other things in the painting as well, but that's told the whole story. When you knew it was a window that the child was looking through. So my son posed actually for the original one, and it looks very much like he looked at the time. And we had the engine, which helps, and so I set it all up. And of course, he wasn't going to pose for me, so I had to work from photographs from that one because it was July and he had a hat and a coat on and a scarf, and he wasn't too happy with me that day. So that's how that one started. If you go back through my body of work, the one you're looking at, some people think it's a girl. It actually is a little boy, but the original one was my son. And if you go back through my early body of work back in the 90s, the early 90s, you'll see the window wishing piece that I'm talking about. And it just has toy trains in the window backwards, because that's how it would look from the perspective of someone looking at the child through, from the other side. So you can't miss it. But it's really, I think the ball that started the ball rolling was that painting.
In a number of your paintings, there's a lot of very warm colors. There's a lot of reds and oranges and yellows. Is that a deliberate choice? Is there a specific mood that you're setting with that color palette in particular?
Yes, absolutely. I'm all about the light, the shadows, the reflections, the way the light, shines on the top of the engine or the front of the engine. Most of my paintings have I do what call underpainting, and the base would be a really soft but warm yellow, not an intense yellow, soft warm yellow. And that kind of that starts the whole painting, and then I'll do an underpainting in maybe sepia or something like that. Then I get into the color, but the bottom of that reads through all the painting. In other words, I let it peek through in certain places and then cover it in other places, but it's enough there to add the warmth to the whole painting.
The Strasburg Railroad is an institution in the heritage railroad industry, and its mechanical services department is proud to lead the way. With the knowledge and experience that has created one of the most reliable steam railroading experiences in the country, the Strasburg Railroad is excited to offer their expertise to the rest of the industry. Strasburg's professional team provides consulting and technical assistance to take your steam locomotive or rail car project from idea to finished product. They stand behind their work and always strive to meet their customers' needs for quality, historic accuracy, and reliability at a price that is fair. Unlike many competitors, they feature a fully equipped boiler, rail car, and machine shop, so the work gets done in-house, helping you get more for your money. Send your inquiries to mechanical@strasburgrailroad.com and let the professionals get to work for you. You're right that the light has such a quality, especially with something like well-stocked shelves, because there's just something about the glint of light coming off the metal that is evocative in and of itself, even before you have any human subjects and whatever expression they have. And going beyond the window, going beyond the Lionel Trains and looking at your gallery, there's also a number of works that you've done that feature real trains. In particular, a couple of favorites that stand out to me are Dreaming of a Better Place and Windy Day. What are your motivations for subjects and scenes like that?
I think most people that are into toy trains are train people. And I know in my circle they are. So the love of trains is, it's all about all trains. It's not just toy trains. They may have zeroed in on Lionel train collecting throughout their life, but there had to be some sort of a draw about the train to begin with. So I started just thinking about, the way people used to do train travel. People used to get all dressed up, and it was very much it was a big deal. And I kind of wanted to go down that road for a little while, and that's why and basically um just the mammoth size of them with the real figure, in proper proportion, is pretty unbelievable. So I kind of wanted to tackle that a little bit. But I just think the love of trains just carries through all kinds of trains.
When you're doing these types of scenes, other than the scale of things, how does the approach differ? Is there a different element to the narrative? Because you said that you think of these paintings in terms of stories. So how do these stories differ from the nostalgia of toy trains?
Most of my ideas come from train collectors and train enthusiasts telling me about how they feel about things. And one of the big things, you know, that I heard often, and if I hear it often enough, I figure it's going to resonate with a lot of people. But one of the big things was always um, how exciting going on a train trip was, and how people back in the day used to dress up and that sort of thing. So I was intrigued with the whole process of train travel. So that's most of those pieces have people in them that are, ready to travel and have their luggage. I found the whole train travel. I mean, people do it today, but back in the early, like the 30s and 40s and 50s, it was really transformative in the way that people, you know, almost treated it like going to like a wedding, getting all dressed up for it, and I was just intrigued with that whole feeling.
Something that made me feel as I was looking through your website as well is that you do a number of interiors. One that particularly stands out to me is Elegant Sanctuary. You have this big round coffee table in the center of this high ceilinged, what appears to be um, a living room or gallery of some kind with sofa, and it evokes the sense of being in a mansion. I'm guessing that some of these perhaps are commissions, but there is a huge body of work that are just these interiors. What are the elements that you're trying to convey other than just sort of a realistic depiction of what the scene is there? What is some of the intent behind this body of work?
Well, that was a lot of intent. That was during COVID. And, as an artist, when COVID hit, I really thought it would affect, people buying art because it was such a traumatic time. Actually, it didn't. It actually really encouraged people to buy art because they became very interested in obviously the interior of their home. People were redecorating, redoing everything, and art fit into that scenario. The the reason I did that whole body of work in the interiors at that time was most of those, and the one you mentioned, are from the lobby of the Sanctuary Hotel that is on Kiowa Island down here in right outside of Charleston. Beautiful, gorgeous lobby. So that was one of the few places I put on a mask and I went and photographed, pretty much the empty lobby of people. There were some people there, but not a lot. But what I was trying to do with that series was, because everything was so uncomfortable in life at that time, I was trying to depict a comfortable, warm, sunny, pleasing place that people could say, I want to be in that room. I want to be in that space. So it's back again to people's emotions. That's how that whole series came about.
And it's evident from what you say that your relationship to your audience is important, because there's some artists for whom it's just expression, and whatever people make of it is whatever people make of it. But it's clear from what you describe that you do have intentions and you do care to an extent about how people are interpreting the work. How does that inform the nature of subjects you choose, whether you're choosing trains or Lionel or other subjects? And what are some of the most meaningful pieces of feedback you've received from your work?
I have letters from people from all over that I've saved for years. Um, People have been in tears when they've been in my booth at York, just because of the way it makes them feel. It brings them to a good place or a happy place. And I have decided long ago that I want my art to make people feel something and feel warm and pleasing. I don't, I'm trying to make a statement with my art. And there are a lot of artists that do, and that's wonderful, but it's not where my head has been at. Um, so basically, I get what feeds me as an artist is being able to touch people with my art. And I have found over the years that it's usually a positive thing or a happy memory or a happy time or enjoying something happy that usually touches people and makes them remember my work. So that's pretty much how I've always, you know, moved forward.
You mentioned that well-stocked shelves was a particular challenge because of the amount of trains and the orientation. What are a couple of the pieces that you've created, Lionel or otherwise, that were the most rewarding to complete or perhaps posed the greatest challenge to you?
Painting for me is like sort of like my language. It's how I express my emotions, but more importantly, it's how people read what I'm doing and depicting. As far as challenging pieces, every painting is a challenge in its own way because for me, it's important that not only the painting is rendered well and done well, but the painting also has this message that I'm trying to give. So I want people to relate to it and I want people to feel good. And I think that that's why, for example, Norman Rockwell, who was at the time of his life known very much as an illustrator, but now all his artwork is, you know, very well received in the fine art community. But he always had this thread to his work that really resonated a positive feeling. And that's basically what I always wanted to do. As far as I don't know if I can pick specific pieces that were more challenging than others. Some were very much more detailed. There's one called My Turn Yet Dead. That's a really early piece that was a bear to set up and get straight. And it was actually on the cover of Classic Toy Trains, probably in like 1993. But it was about, obviously, is it my turn yet, Dad? The little boy's waiting to get his turn. The ZW to run the trains. And those are the kind of things that I really, you know, want people to remember and feel. The same with my other work. As far as the other work that I do a lot of obviously the interiors that you've seen. I do a lot of bar scenes as well, but they're happy bar scenes. They're not bar fights. They're like you know, people enjoying being out, enjoying other people's company. Um, that that is another thing that people really relate to. And restaurant scenes, you know, basically I try to pick the things in life that make me feel something, but hopefully make somebody else feel something or remember something or enjoy something.
I'm looking at My Turn Yet Now, Dad, and to describe the scene, Christmas tree in the background, open presents, train set on the floor, with the implication that it's for the boy who's lying on the floor, but the dad is the one at the controls. And it seems to me that that really exemplifies this idea of narrative and story, and also the concept that it's okay to always connect with your past self, and it's always okay to play. I think that's something that, as model railroaders, it's a common idea that, yeah, we're allowed to play. But in the greater cultural scheme of things, sometimes we have to be reminded more frequently that that type of reconnecting with childhood and that cyclical nature of it is okay and welcome.
For sure. I totally agree. And that's one of the things that I think I like the most about specifically Lionel Train collecting is these men are still little boys in the way that they love the trains, and it's a wonderful thing to pass down through generations, and I think that's why they've endured for 123 years.
As you're connected, especially with the toy train side of the community, do you see more girls and women getting into it, not just because their husband or brother or relative is into it, but kind of establishing their own love of it?
Over the years I have met and seen, you know, many women enthusiasts as well, but nothing in comparison to men. I think what happens is the moms will get into it if the child gets into it, and the child gets into it, the father's into it, and it starts to become a family affair. And that's where I see mostly women and girls getting involved in it. My daughter, who's not a train enthusiast at this point, but grew up enjoying and the nostalgia of all the trains under the tree. And that was just a normal part of her childhood. So I think in that way, girls and women are into it. As far as the sales of my prints and that sort of thing, probably most of my clientele are women, but it's basically because they're looking at these prints to give as a gift to their son, their husband, their father, whatever. That's sort of the circle of toy train collecting in my world.
And because you have such experience, because you have these models in your collection, do you have a particular favorite locomotive?
The Santa Fe. I've painted the Santa Fe probably, oh, I can't even tell you how many times. Many, many times. From the side, from the front, from the top, doesn't matter. But I love the colors of the Santa Fe. It probably is my most favorite of all the trains that I've painted.
I think it's safe to say that this Lionel Santa Fe set is iconic, not just within toy trains, but also just as a toy, period. I feel like that thing just exemplifies the idea of when people hear, heck, even if people heard model run, they'd still probably think of the Lionel Santa Fe from how many ever years ago.
But it was the top engine for, I don't quote me, but I probably like 17 years back in the day. I think that was the number that I had got given, but I could be wrong. But many years, many years, it was probably their top selling engine.
I would believe it.
And I do like the steam engines too. They're much more difficult to paint, obviously, because of all the, please don't clump the rivets. A lot of my art is indicated not as realistic as people think it is. They think it's like so realistic, and it is. But if you look close, there's a lot of brush strokes. There's a lot of shadowing. There's a lot of indicating of like shapes that will create. And that's what makes it art as opposed to a photographic painting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that that's a good way to view it. Because you've been in this for a long time, you have this relationship with Lionel. You recently, as of recording this in September of 2023, had the opportunity to present a full-sized print of well-stocked shelves to Lionel President Howard Hitchcock. How was that as an experience?
Yes, I had the honor of presenting a very large print of actually a life size. That was the size the painting, the original painting was. The #1 artist proof to Lionel Trains at the convention banquet, and it was wonderful to see everyone. I've enjoyed working with Lionel through many different owners, leaders, that sort of thing, for 32 years. And the people that I work with there now are just wonderful. And we collaborate on product every year. They always have like 3 or 4 of my pieces with my artwork on through in the catalog, and it's kind of come full circle. And I just wanted to say thank you and show my appreciation to them for having the faith and trust in me, and thank you to everyone that has supported my artwork for this long. I'm very grateful. It's not lost.
How does your relationship work with them? Do they come to you with specific requests of images of, oh, we're trying to highlight this product, or oh, we're viewing something for our new catalogs? What is that collaboration like?
Yes, but I'm not boxed in. In other words, they may have a certain piece that they want to focus in on, that I can kind of take it where I want to go. Now we're working on a series now of called Iconic Engines, and there's probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 pieces in the box cars right now. And in the beginning, I pretty much, chose, there was the GG1, obviously, the Santa Fe 773, basically, the really sought after engines. But we've been, working together, and we've been talking about which engines, and I usually work with the engines that maybe they're focusing on something with the next year. I always work about a year out. Um, so what I'm painting now won't come out until next fall. And I don't, they're very, very open to ideas. I've come up with ideas, we've run with them. They've come up with ideas, we run with them. We have a really good working relationship.
It's so nice to see artwork like yours supported in this day and age where there are so many alternatives. It's great to see that a company like Lionel sees the value in what you're providing.
I think about it's all about again creating the emotional impact, and I think art has always done that. I mean, I'm not photography can do it in many ways as well, but I think if art is done right, we can get more dreamy about the whole thing and really like move a person's um emotional heartstrings a little bit. And that's why I'm licensed basically to do Lionel Train prints. And the print that's why I think the prints have taken off and done as well as they have, is because people really like, to hang them up and to be able to kind of look at them. And I like to keep my artwork busy enough that people can continually look up at it and see new things and see new parts and notice new shadows and that sort of thing. It's important for me to know that they're enjoying the art.
What do you find most satisfying about painting as a means of expression?
It's my language. I mean, if I couldn't paint, I don't know what I would do. I get lost, in the zone, they call it. But when I'm painting, hours and hours can go by and I don't feel it. I don't see it. And when I'll look up at the clock sometimes and it'll be, 6 o'clock at night and I'll think it's like, noon. It's just how I relate to people for the most part. Obviously, we relate all in the basic ways. But I think, for me, it's just the way I speak to people, the way I interpret my thoughts are usually their thoughts.
That's a good point. And I think that you're right that it's absolutely a language in and of itself, because here I could describe the images for you who are joining us today. But as I say, I encourage you to click the link that's going to be in the show notes to check out her work, because there's something about seeing it that no amount of words can fully describe. Other than this current project that you're working on for Lionel, what are some other future projects that you're particularly excited about?
First of all, if you'd like to, you can follow me on Instagram, which is my handle on that is Angela Trotta Thomas artist. Make sure the artist is behind it. That's the way you will see future projects in progress. Right now, I'm thinking about, I've always loved the catalogs, and for me, it was the catalogs and the evocative art, especially obviously on the cover of the catalogs, that really got me going. So I'd like to do some things that, feature the toys themselves, but also really speak to the catalogs. And so I have a few things in mind right now that I can't seem to get to right now because I've got other private commissions right in the middle of everything, but I will get to them because that's kind of formulating. I think about a painting sometimes for weeks or months before I even get to the painting, because I'm lucky enough to have a really busy schedule and a lot of private commission work. So I can't necessarily just come up with an idea and the next day I start it, unless I have a deadline specifically for it. Um, that usually takes me some time to get through to the point. And that's the time that the idea percolates. And I basically, I know I want to do some things, like I said, getting the catalogs in there more, because I think that was a really big part of the memory too. It wasn't only just getting the trains, it was dreaming of the trains and being your own engineer and your own empire that the catalogs depicted for a lot of kids. And I want to focus in that in a little bit.
Because you're doing this not just out of your love of it and the means of expression, but also as part of your livelihood. How do you maintain that balance so that you never, while you obviously have obligations, you're never feeling fatigued by it, as sometimes these passions that become livelihoods can fall into?
Because I do a lot of other things. If you look at my website, you'll see that there's a whole section. I mean, I do everything from pets to um, bar scenes to restaurant scenes to interiors. I do portraits, and I'm pretty prolific in the way that I work a lot and get a lot done. And I'm because of my background in illustration, I'm very time sensitive, so I can move pretty quickly. I just make sure that when if I feel fatigued, which doesn't happen, but it can, I do something different for the next piece. I'll just move into a whole different arena and paint one of these other subject matters. And then when I come back, it's fresh again. It's all about keeping it interesting and switching it up and not just continually doing the same thing over and over again.
A good approach for sure. Whenever I find myself going to my dentist's office, they have a TV playing Bob Ross doing his thing. And I look at that, I go, I could see painting someday. That seems like fun. And then I'll go to an occasional paint and sip event, and I'll probably be more into the painting than the sipping. So I occasionally think, oh, I want to get into this. And then I look at work like yours, which I think is kind of what I myself would want to do if I was going in that direction of realistic scenes rather than just, abstract painting. But then I'm daunted by that because I realize how much it takes. So, how do you encourage beginners to get into painting?
That's a really good question. And when I was teaching, I used to come across, and I was teaching juniors and seniors in college, so they had been doing art for some time. But I constantly had to remind them of comparing themselves to themselves. In other words, your own personal growth, because you don't know what experiences someone had or opportunities someone had that's sitting next to you. I feel like um, drawing first. It's all about drawing first and draw everything. Set up a train, set up a teapot, set up a little still life. Draw, look at shapes, break it down into shapes. There's many books, art books out there that you can get that kind of, address that. But that was a beginning tool, but I still use the whole shape thing because it's all about the proportions from one thing to the other. And I think that drawing is probably and forget about color right now, just drawing. The painting will come. The painting comes, people say to me a lot of times, well, how long did it take you to paint that painting? And I usually tell them about 40 years because it's not just that painting. It's all the painting I've done that culminates in each piece. And, the things I've learned, the techniques I've developed, that takes time and a lot of practice. But, you can always pick up a pencil and you can always keep a sketchbook with you and you can always sketch. And don't worry about if it's perfect or it's not. But in a year, pull them back out when you've kept doing them and look at your growth, and you will see growth. And that's probably my biggest encouragement to anybody who has interest in art. And it doesn't matter when you start. You could start. I mean, there are many people that don't start till they're retired and they end up becoming, well known and having a good career. It's all about putting the time in. And I would say if you're going to spend your time right now, spend your time drawing. That's developing your drawing skills.
You're absolutely right. And I agree in particular with the idea of I've been working on this painting for 40 years because as a freelance filmmaker, it's easy in my own mind to think of just the literal time I've put in on a recent project. But the reality is that it's backed by the over 15 years of knowledge that I have that informs the choices that I make.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That is and so the persistence of it, the persistence of saying that I may not be where I want to be yet, but I need to keep at this and recognize that my first F unit is going to have some crazy dimensions on the nose as an illustration before it looks like a proper F unit.
Exactly. And that's really what's the most important part, is definitely that will come. You'd be surprised. Your eye fine tunes after a while when you keep, for example, like when I'm in a restaurant, I'm looking around and I look like I'm being nosy, but I'm looking at the way the light's hitting someone's face, or the way the shadows are from the chair on the floor from the sun coming in. Little things like that. I just do little sketches of that, like that kind of stuff, because those are the kind of things that creep into your mind, and then when you go to paint, that stuff will come back. But you have to notice it first. You have to pay attention to it first, and the best way to do that is to draw it.
I think that's true with any art, is that the more observant you are, whether that be observing others in the medium that you work in, or just observant in general as a means of informing your work, whether it's directly influencing it or not, you can learn a lot from that. I think that's a really good way of thinking about it.
Right, right. It's just probably the same in your world. The more you notice, the more things about what you do you want to incorporate into your work. And if you're interested in drawing, that, and moving the needle toward painting, I would, and also one of the things I would really suggest for anybody that's really, really interested in doing this would be to get a book on value, because it's the value of things that really shows the light and the shadow and that sort of thing, and having, um, the shadow be the right amount of darkness behind the item that you're drawing or painting. It's invaluable to understand value, and value will be a really important part of painting as well. So I would say, try to scoff up some books on value in art, value in painting, value in drawing.
Wonderful advice. Her website is angelatrottathomas.com. I will have a link in the show notes to that, as well as her Instagram account. So you can see this work if you haven't already. It absolutely bears taking a look at, maybe picking up a print or commissioning her to do work. You can also, I think, probably through Lionel's store, pick up the puzzle. I don't know where you get it because it was a gift to me, but it was a good puzzle. For a 2,000-piece puzzle, it was a good husband-wife bonding activity. Angela, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate so much your time and going into the details of why and how you do what you do. This has been tremendous. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Nicholas. I enjoyed it very, very much as well. I appreciate your interest very much.
And now, the question of the day.
Last time on the Roundhouse, I asked you guys what your favorite railroad holiday memories are. Here are some of the responses that I wanted to share with you. Kristen Fredrickson writes, visited North Carolina Transportation Museum during Polar Express with a friend, not to ride, but to see the museum and see how their event runs. And wow, what an operation. Tony Berzio, looking out the window at the little Texas towns with their Christmas lights on the Sunset Limited from LA to Florida. That sounds like a cool ambience. Kenneth Flanagan says, at Strasburg, I went on their 'Twas the Night Before Christmas train. They told the story during the ride. It was night trip as well, and I sat near the working fireplace on the car and met Santa. It was a perfect setting. Dave Camisa, helping out at the Rock Hill Trolley Museum. I've set up some model train displays for them over the years, and this year was no different. Worth it seeing the kids' eyes light up on the ride as well as the display. And David Rayleigh shares, acting conductor for the improvised Christmas trolley when Lois, the little doodlebug they have, broke down at Strasburg. 90 was fired up to pull one coach and a caboose, then swapping that train for the Night Before Christmas train, and then standing on the rear of the train at the East End as 90 rounded the curve at Cherry Hill coming back from Paradise, leaning out the fireman's side to see the lights of the passenger cars shimmer against the structures at Cherry Crest, and then turning around to see the tracks fade away from me into the night, with only my lantern, 2 rear markers, and the bright light of the gibbous moon to discern the scene. I'll never, ever forget it. That sounds especially cool. Your question of the day for this episode is, going into the new year, what are you excited about? Let me know on the roundhousepodcast.com. Links to social media are there. Once again, guys, thank you for joining the Roundhouse in 2023. We've had some great stories shared here, and I look forward to what 2024 brings, because as you know, the Roundhouse is our house.